Welcome to a Priya Show, investing in Asian real assets.
Welcome to the Priya podcast interview with Mark Cooper. And today I'm talking to Renu Sud Karnad, who's Managing Director of Housing Development Finance Corporation in India. Welcome, Renu.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much.
I thought we'd start off by talking a little bit about HDFC, because it's not an organisation that I'm personally that familiar with, and maybe the same for some of our listeners or readers as well. So perhaps if you could tell us a little bit about the organisation.
Oh, that's a very tricky question you asked, because you might just spend another 3 hours here with the sort of passion that I feel for this company. But okay, on a more serious note. Yes, let me first say hello to all the listeners here too, because I forgot that we were on a podcast. So hello, everyone. So Mark, this was a company which was started in 1977. And the whole idea was there was a chairman of another, it's just okay. Can we start once again? I just wanted to know, we can keep editing it. I mean, you
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. Just give a pause before you start.
Once again?
Yeah.
Can I start once again? Yeah?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me here, and thank you, Priya. And hello to all the listeners on this podcast. Mark, that the question that you asked me, I think is a question, if you really want me to go through it, it might take you a couple of hours being here, because I feel just so passionately about this company. Well, let me tell you a little about it, how it was set up. Back in the 1975, 77, or soon after India's independence, people like my father could never dream of buying a home. And if they ever got a home of their own, it was once they had retired and they got their retirement benefits and they invested that in a home and basically used up what they were going to use for their living for a home. On came HDFC, and on came a gentleman called H.D. Parikh, who used to be the chairman of a development finance institution called ICICI. And coincidentally, Mark, they're our biggest competitors today. So H.D. Parikh had schooled in England, somewhere from where you are. And he had studied the building societies, and he'd studied, how they were operating and how they were, helping people own homes. And he always wanted to do that. He wanted to set up a company that would that would help middle-income India own homes. Mm-hmm. So we had this youngster go to the US to study the SNLs, to study the building societies. And based on that, this company was set up. Our first loan, Mark, was given out in September of 78. That was the first time this HDFC, the 4 letters, came into being. Since then, it's now 42, 43 years. We have a bank, which is the best bank in India. We have a life insurance company, which is also listed. We have an asset management company. We have a non-life company. We have an education lending company. And we have become a huge conglomerate in less than 50 years, in exactly 43 years. And how did that happen, Mark? The fact that we gave loans to people and we touched the hearts of people, the credibility that we set up for ourselves, for HDFC as a company, which actually delivers what it promises: no corruption, no kickbacks, customer being treated as if he was God. I don't think we have the same levels of customer service today as we had when we started it, okay? And that really created a brand. Brand HDFC was created. Mm-hmm. Just from a small housing loan, literally. Because, Mark, if you go back and see, in most countries, why just in India, house is the most important asset you have.
Yeah.
And for most people, I think in India, it's the only, you only buy a house once in your lifetime. Unlike in some other Western societies where people keep changing homes, most people buy that most important asset tighten their belts to get the money, take some money from an institution and buy the dream home. So that little sentiment of owning a home actually triggered this whole huge financial conglomerate that you see today. I think somewhere, I might just be a little wrong because markets keep changing, but I think the market value of our group today will be close to 150 or 160 billion dollars. So, that is, I'm just saying how a small idea, we talk about entrepreneurships and we talk about all these new companies that are coming in. If you really ask me, I think at that point in time, that gentleman was the real entrepreneur. Mark, nobody owns HDFC. Nobody owns, no individual owns HDFC. Mm-hmm. It's a completely publicly held company. We are employees. We're about 3,000 employees. We own, between us, maybe 1 or 2% of the company. The rest of the company it's a listed company on the Indian Stock Exchange, Bombay Stock Exchange. Every share of ours is out there. So we don't have a parent. We don't have somebody to run to who's going to bail us out. Mm-hmm. But in return, we are there for our subsidiaries. So all the subsidiaries that I talked about, we are the holding company for them. We're also a mortgage company.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Now, you said the start date was 77, and I see from your bio that you joined in 78, so pretty much right at the start. Tell us a bit about how your career and how you've developed with
Mark,
the company it's grown.
Mark, I gave the first loan. I did the documentation. I was a young girl, fresh out of with a legal degree, and I did the documentation of the first ever loan that we did. And something that I just have to share this because it's just too funny, though I'm quite embarrassed about it. But it was the first loan I'd ever done. And I took the wrong document. I was supposed to keep the original document with me and give the copy to the customer. I did it the other way around. The next day, all hell broke loose. And we were running all over the place to get to the guy to exchange the agreement. So, well, that was what it was. So I've been there for so many years. I've seen us grow. And I started as a junior most person in legal, where I was supposed to do that documentation. Then over some time, I moved to the credit appraisal department, which is where you started assessing. How much do you give to a person when he walks in? And from there, it started growing. Honestly, Mark, we are such a unique company and we were in such a unique position. I don't think we can ever, either my company or me, be as successful as we are had we started it today. It was nothing like this at that time. And so all you could do was grow. So even if you were the worst, but you were growing because your product was so wonderful. And if you were just willing to work, willing to, have fun while you work, I think that's what did it.
That's good. And tell us a bit how you got to your current position. So managing director from the junior legal girl. That's a long way.
So as I said, when you're fewer people, you get promoted faster. Right? And your promotions are, and we were growing, we were growing, we were just Bombay based. Then we started growing, getting into other cities. Today, as we speak, we are far, far less smaller than most companies, but we are at about 300 odd locations. So I grew with the company. I then moved to Delhi because I got married, and HDFC is headquartered in Mumbai. I got married and I came to Delhi. And since I had the experience, I became the number 2 because I had come from the head office and I knew what was supposed to be done, and it was a new outfit in Delhi. So I grew in Delhi. And what happens in Delhi, Mark, because Delhi is also the seat of power of HDFC, of the country, right? Yeah. All your, any approvals you want, any exemptions you want, anything that you want done for the sector, anything that you want changed for the sector, all the decisions happen in Delhi. So since I was in Delhi, I sort of got coached with my then seniors as to how to even navigate, what you call is the government system, which, by the way, we learned from the British. Okay, so to navigate dealing with the undersecretaries, the deputy secretaries, so that also was a huge learning, because to be able to go and suggest to the powers that be that you need to make certain changes in the laws and why and how it's going to help, it in itself, in many ways hones your expertise, your knowledge levels, your presentation skills, and the fact that you better know everything backwards, because they can question you on anything,
Yeah.
So your skills start developing. And so I stayed here. I'm even now in Delhi, but for a short while, my husband got posted to the US, and so I moved there. I got myself a degree from Princeton during that period, but I came right back to this job. I mean, I could have gone anywhere, but I love it. I love what we do. I love what we've achieved. We have till now helped about 700,000 people to own their own homes, okay, which is just the smallest piece of it. We've helped innumerable builders, developers to build the homes and sell and make it available. We've played pioneer roles in terms of, benchmarking customer service when nobody knew what customer service was, or not new, I would say. It wasn't a big thing,
Yeah.
We set up companies which we feel very proud of, that they are the best in the segments that they are doing. And most of all, Mark, I think the most important thing I would say is the culture that we created in HDFC, the culture of, I firmly believe that we were really the first, what you call the employee entrepreneurs. We didn't own the company one bit, nothing. We just worked there. There was just a passion. There was a feeling of ownership. We so created that feeling of ownership that you're working for a cause, and you're working for, you were working for your job. You're not really working for that boss,
Mm-hmm.
And that really has permeated through the whole group. So if you ever come to India, and if you try and understand what it means, the brand means, the first thing that people will tell you will come to the mind is that there's an integrity of purpose in this brand. I think that was the best part of it.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like when you talk about ownership in a wider sense than just having a financial stake in the company,
which we started getting, Mark, about 17 years ago. So we're 42 years, about 17, 18 years ago, learning from some of the Western countries and learning from some of our investors who were seeing what was happening. And we started what you call the employee stock options programs,
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to share another piece about us is our employee stock options are given from the chairman right up to the junior most employee, to the drivers, to the people. If you ever come to my office and you get a cup of coffee served to you, the person who's serving you coffee will also be an owner of HDFC. So right through. So that was the other thing that we did,
Okay, great, fantastic. I wanted to talk a bit more about the housing market in India. Now, you said you provided loans to 700,000 people, but there's obviously there's a huge population and the sort of middle India growing at a really rapid pace. What do you think needs to be done, or what more can be done to bring housing finance to a wider section of Indian population, and what are you doing at HDFC about that?
Yeah, so I just step back a little bit, Mark. One of the biggest problems in housing in India is the price of land, the cost of land. If you want to buy a house in a Mumbai or a Delhi, about 70 to 75% of the price of an apartment is actually the cost of land underlying. So you'll have these tall apartments, but the price of land that the developer has paid to build, it's really, really very high. It's as high as Tokyo or as high as New York.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So in India, we really need to make land more available, and we need to bring down the price of land, particularly in areas in urban conglomerates where a whole lot of people, because they can't afford to live, to buy those homes, end up living in those shanty towns and into those slums.
Yeah.
So if you come to India, one of the first things a lot of people sort of balk at is just, poverty. There is poverty, yeah. But what you see on the roads, you will be surprised to know, Mark, that they're not as poor as they look. It's just that they don't have a home. So they are squatters. They're sitting on roads. They're sitting, their monthly income will be more than enough to look after themselves and their children if they had a roof over their head, if they could afford to get a roof over their head. So I have to say that in the recent past, the government has done quite a bit. Money is available to most people, I would say, not absolutely destitute, but people who have an income most likely are able to get, some form of funding. What they cannot get is the price point of what they can afford. That sort of a unit is not available. And that is where, unfortunately, entities like HDFC can't do much because we are not into the business of construction. We're not into the business of development. But yes, governments need to come in. And, I do agree, Mark, that subsidies are not the way to run, a country. You can't have everything which is subsidized. But there have been very good examples of how housing has been handled by some of the smaller countries, by making public housing. It's like Singapore is a classic example of how wonderfully they've done what they've done. The HDB, which is the Singapore government's housing board, builds homes and gives them out on lease to people to live in them, but only they can live in them. Once something happens to them, they have to move. So something like this needs to happen. One of the other things that's lacking, and that, Mark, is because of our legal, rules that we have, our laws that we have. Very few of us build homes to rent. Like in some of the other countries, build to let is a huge, mass of homes that you can find. People don't do that because, unfortunately, in most of our states, the laws are very pro-tenant. So if a tenant gets in and decides not to vacate, you virtually lose your home. I mean, of course, it's there. He doesn't own it. But at the same time, you don't get it. So with the result that people are so fearful of building and renting. So that's one thing which is not really encouraging home ownership. Because, if I have a home, I'm living in a house, but I have the wherewithal maybe to, get two more and rent them out. But I'd say, I don't want to do that. Who wants to get into the hassle of renting out, go to courts, making sure the person, leaves? That process can become easier. Other than the fact also, if we could come up with good rental housing, be it from the government or be it from private sector for that matter. You have these huge rental companies, across the world. You've seen so many of them, Hines, and so many names I can take, who own these large buildings, which are all rented buildings. Those don't exist in India as yet. Mm-hmm. So if we have to solve our housing problem, we really need to do that. At the HDFC level, what do we do? So, Mark, at the HDFC level, what we have tried to do is try and cover every type of individual, whether he is employed, whether he's self-employed, whether his income is from rural, sources, or he's from urban sources. We've tried to create products around each type of customer that we have. So, Mark, for a salaried employee, it's very simple. You earn X, I'll give you so much, you pay me back that much, the loan is done. Yeah. For the guy who's in the rural areas, you have cropping patterns. They get money 4 times a year. So you have to have a product which is going to coincide with when their money comes in and flows in, You need to most probably ensure that they have some cover for climate in case, the rains don't come on time. Doctors have a different way of operating. So we've tried to create products for every type of customer that we have to try and see whether we can cater to their ability to pay us.
Okay, interesting. Just to go back to the land cost question, do you think that the infrastructure could be a sort of a partial solution, meaning that if you have, say, rapid transport into the CBDs of big cities, that would free up land for building sort of on the outskirts, but still make them viable for people working in the centre?
Yes, absolutely. So wherever that has happened, and if you, Bombay is one example of where rapid transport has been available for many, many years. So as you, I'm not sure whether you know, but Bombay is an island, you know, and then it stretches. So the length of Bombay from one end to the other is really long. And people are coming from as far as 40 kilometers out to come and work because there was a very good local train system, you know, where you could take a train and come in. But they are now completely packed. I mean, you know, if you try to get onto a train during peak hours in Mumbai, it is impossible. So, but it's true. Now they've started working on the metro. There are metros in many cities. So this whole thing of, you know, towns developing, satellite towns developing around the main areas has begun. But again, you know, Mark, in India, unlike maybe, you know, China would have been so much easier. I want to have a road go this way. They have all the powers and the laws and they're able to vacate it and the railroad comes in, you know. In India, it's not like that. We are a democracy. We have these laws that have to be passed. So if there is a tree in the middle of a road, it might take you a few years, you know, to be able to cut the tree because trees are not allowed to be cut, right? So these are some of the good and the bad in a democracy. When you value it, these are the negatives of it, right? Yeah. But at the same time, things can be speeded up, which is what doesn't happen. So our legal, in India, we've seen a lot of reforms. We've seen financial reforms, agri reforms, you know. I think one of the reforms that we need very, very badly is legal reforms, where we need to have, you know, small things get stuck for years at end. And, you know, so one of the biggest problems that comes in the way of infrastructure and what you're saying and, you know, making it easy is really this aspect.
Okay, excellent. Now, I was looking at your biography, and it describes you as a technology evangelist. Can you tell us a bit about that and about how you're using tech?
So very honestly, this is, you know, one of these youngsters who make your CV for you, which has to be put up. And I told him, what the hell is this, you know? So, well, honestly, I think the pandemic has, Mark, made everybody a technology evangelist, right? All of us have learned things that we've never learned in the past. Okay,
yes, look at us now. So.
Absolutely, I mean, really. But you know, I have always felt since the last maybe 10 years when we first started using, when telecom in India became cheaper, and when, you know, telecommunications and getting lines and getting connectivity became really, really much easier than it was, you know, when I was growing up. When I was growing up, to get a telephone connection at home, it could have taken you a couple of years, right? Once you applied for it. And now, I mean, it's literally in 50 years, 60 years, because I most probably must have looked for a phone when I was 15 years old. You know, 60 years, the things have just completely changed. So we realized at that time, very honestly, that while we are going to grow, if we keep growing with the number of people that we use to do a clutch of loans, it's never going to make sense. I'll share one more thing with you, Mark. Our cost to income ratio at HDFC, we are at 9, which is one of the lowest in the world. Why is it the lowest in the world? Because we use technology when we could. So many years ago, we started using a process by which everything needn't be done at the main office. Or all offices didn't have to be those large, huge offices. They could be small, little reach outs and use telecommunications and technology to connect to the main hubs. So we really use this program of hub and spoke. And that's where my inputs into how to make the company more efficient, as I look at lending, I'm in charge of lending, and how can we bring our costs down? Honestly, it started with that when I started saying, wow, this is great. And since then, yes, I push my guys to get whatever we can get, the best. It is true that we always don't need the best because we are only a one product company, but whatever we need in terms of better customer service, better efficiencies, better costing for ourselves, I push it. And I really think my generation has seen, not my parents and not my children, they were born with all these. We really saw how technology changed and how it's changed all our lives. So I try and push my guys and I try and tell them, you better get the best and don't worry about the money, but let's make sure it's something that is going to either bring our cost down or it's going to, enhance the experience of the customer.
Yeah. Okay. Now I noticed you also have international experience. You've been the president of the International Union for Housing Finance. So I just wondered, from your involvement there, what would you say that India could learn from other nations with regard to housing finance, and what could other nations learn from India's experience? I mean, one of the things that you've told me today that I was interested in was how your products are very much tailored to people's jobs and what they do. And say in the UK, for example, I don't think that's the case. So that's something, where India is ahead already. But it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on that both ways.
So very honestly, Mark, first to answer the first question first, what I learned from being the president and being member of that entity, unfortunately over time, it's lost its, importance and, but it was a great platform for all of us to understand how the housing problems, particularly of the low end type, were handled by many, many countries. And I really honestly learned a huge. I'll give you one small example. So in Germany, I mean, now we are a much more connected world. 30 years ago, going abroad was such a big thing in life. You couldn't afford it. It was too expensive. You couldn't get money in India. You had to get $50 if you had to go abroad. You had capital constraints in India. Okay. So coming back to what you're saying, there was Germany post-war ran a fabulous program called the Prakas program. What they did there was, and you should read it up sometime. I would save X amount at a much lower rate. Supposing the rate of interest in the market was, just for example, 5, I would come and tell you as the entity that please keep my money at 2%, okay? And I'm going to save with you for the next 3 years. In 3 years' time, I would have saved X amount. You give me back 2 to 3 times, depending on the, the ratios, 3 times that money at a rate of interest, which is 2% on what I've saved. So if the rates in the market were 5, and I saved at 2. Yes, I got 2. I didn't get 5. But I got 3 times that money back at 4%. So it was a great scheme for young people or for people who didn't have that down payment. All of us need a down payment, right? When you buy a home. So you are building your down payment in a way, and eventually also working out with the entity that you're getting a certain, this is not going to buy you a full home, but you're going to get a certain amount of money at a much lower rate. I thought it was a fabulous scheme. And Mark, this was a scheme that Germany started post the war because all their homes were bombed out. And how do you help, You can't write checks, okay? You can't say, okay, how much money does the government have? You can't house the whole population. It was a fabulous scheme. We adopted it in India. And it was a learning, we learned it from, so these are the things that you learned. Another thing I still learned, which was fabulous, it was from Brazil. There's it's called My Home, My Village. How the whole Brazilian setup. They helped the people who were coming, living in those what are they called? 5 years. The slums.
The favelas.
They went the what?
The favelas, I think.
Yeah, favelas.
Yeah.
The favelas, or maybe is it pronounced as T? I don't know. So how they, went in there and how they worked with the people there to actually, make the living conditions better. So I think it was a fabulous platform. From our point of view, I think we did very well there because, HDFC, just to go back a little bit, Mark, we were funded, initially when it was set up by the International Finance Corporation, IFC. And we are a poster boy for IFC. Because I think nothing IFC has done ever has really become what it is today. So they were a 5% shareholder of HDFC when they started. And they gave us a $4 million line of credit in 1977, 78, okay? And, you know, what's happened to us. So we are there in all their programs. We are there helping them. We are there working with them, you know. So, and they work a lot in Africa. IFC, the World Bank does a lot. So through this IUHF program where all these countries used to go, and of course through the IFC, I shouldn't take that away, we have helped so many countries in Africa and in Eastern Europe actually set up their housing finance systems. We've worked in Egypt, we worked in Mauritius, we worked in Bulgaria. We've worked in about, I would say, 8 or 9 countries where we actually had, you know, worked with them. Others we've done, you know, gone and done lectures, training, etc. We have a training program where we train people, whoever wants to learn, you know, from this part of this IUHF. So we do a lot there. So these are some of the exchanges that we, you know, I personally picked up.
Okay.
Plus, I love traveling. I'm a railwayman's daughter, so I saw the world.
Yes, now I'm going to talk to you about that in a little bit. But you've been involved with other organisations as well, international business organisations and others. What was your favourite outside HDFC? Which were you kind of most proud of your sort of extracurricular involvement?
So one is actually a part of HDFC. It's not. It's a separate company.
Okay.
And I don't have any official position on it as yet, or even now. So we have set up. We bought actually into a education loan company called Credila. You know, Mark, I really think what India needs now in a big way is to get our middle income people to get good education. So we have education, and I'm a, you know, product of that. But to get good education, it has to cost money. And education in India, much of the education in India, which is free, is not good enough. So the public sector system, the private sector system, has to come up and is coming up with, you know, colleges and, you know, institutions, but they cost money. Mm-hmm. So how do you get that common, you know, income person, husband, wife, small man, but wanting their children to get into colleges that they can't afford? So we set up an education loan company. Nothing new. It happens everywhere. In the US and all, you know, you have all your Sally Mays. I'm sure the British has all these loans. In England also. Here we didn't have that. And so I really feel after what we did in HDFC, I think this is the next very important part of a person's growing, evolving, getting good education. So I feel very strongly about that. The one that I enjoyed the most, if you ask me, I used to be on the board of a hotel company called the Oberoi's. I'm on boards of a lot of these financial companies. So they're all nice and fun and okay. But the fun one was, you know, I'm very fascinated with hotels. It's the way they run it. I always used to grow up thinking, how can you order anything in the world and they're able to rustle it up for you? You know, how they run. I mean, the way they treat you, you go there the third time, you know, it's like royalty walking in, you know, I love that. So I used to be on the board of a very good chain in India called the Oberoi's. Mm-hmm. And they make these beautiful properties and these beautiful, so it's luxury and it's wonderful. I love that stint of mine. Unfortunately, I had to get off it. So, well, that was fun. I mean, I've actually enjoyed most of my boards. I've always learned something or the other. I was on a board of a company in the US, which was TransUnion, which was the credit rating company. Mm-hmm. And there I was there for quite a few years. You know, it was a different learning because when you are on those boards, you're also learning, you know, how people in other economies or in other businesses behave. You know, I've never worked abroad, and that's one regret that I have. So this way you sort of got as close to, you know, working with people in another geography, in another system.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, excellent. Right. Now then, I want to take you up. You mentioned you're a railwayman's daughter. And so tell me about the trains, because obviously India's got a massive rail system.
I know.
You have
So
a
that's what
favourite
you guys
journey?
left us. You British guys left that for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, along with the government. The railways were the good part of it, I guess. Right. Yeah. See, the railways have always fascinated us because I'm also married to a railwayman's son. So my husband comes from an exactly same background. We are from two different parts of the country, but we have had the same upbringing, And so when we used to grow up, trains were free and you went wherever your parents went, they sort of took you. And so one of the perks of being a railwayman at that time, not so anymore, your family could travel with you anywhere,
Okay.
So we could travel anywhere. Then, Mark, I don't know whether they ever had it in the British railway system. It has to be there because these were all British, what they call saloons. So you have the long train, and at the end of the train, they used to have one bogie, which was converted into a living room, a drawing room, a kitchen, bedrooms, the most luxurious parts. I think all the Britishers, when they used to go in and lay the railway lines, and that's what they used to use. And so the Indian Railways has a few of them. And those were such fun traveling when your father went on work. And, so I think we just learned it from there and just so enjoyed it. Even today, when, we travel to Europe once in a while and you get off a train, my husband sees an engine coming in, he stops and he waits till the engine comes all the way in and stops. It's childhood coming back.
And do you have a kind of a favorite trip or a dream trip that you'd like to do either in India or somewhere else as well?
Oh, I'd love to do. I've heard so much about two trips. Okay. One is the one in Lhasa, where there are trains.
Yeah.
A couple of my friends from India have been there and they've said it's absolutely fabulous. Of course, you need oxygen and all. I can't even imagine what it is. It's so beautiful. The other one, which is again childhood family. If you ever saw Dr. Zhivago, the film, in Dr. Zhivago, the fellow takes the train right through the Russian landscape where they go through. That's also a beautiful train journey. I wish I could do that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, those are lovely train journeys. My husband and I keep saying that some of the train journeys that we've read about was once we retire, we are supposed to do that. And I'm sure we are going to do one of them at least.
That's great. I've always fancied doing the Trans-Siberian Express.
That's the one. That's the one that goes through, right?
That landscape.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
so
the 5 days or something it takes you. Or...
Yeah, even longer, I think, maybe.
Yeah.
Go through
Mark, there's a lovely one in India, which if you ever have time, and have you visited us in India? Have you ever come to India?
No, I haven't yet. That is a major gap in my travel.
You should do that. So there are these trains that run in the state of Rajasthan, and they are run where exactly the saloons I'm talking about. They've put together a whole lot of them, and they take you to the 2-3 beautiful cities of Rajasthan, which normally people visit. Where you have these the palaces and all. And that is a lovely train to spend I think it's either 4 days or 7 days. If you ever get this opportunity, that's also a very nice trip.
Okay, right. I'll take you up on that. Last one. We talked about your career at the beginning, and I know a lot of people who view these podcasts are looking for kind of a little bit of career advice. So, what would you say is the best piece of career advice that you've ever received, and who gave it to you?
So honestly, and I really believe that. I tell my children that too. I got this advice from one of my bosses. I've had many bosses in life, as is obvious, right? But one of my bosses who was very senior, and he once told me, he said, the day you wake up in the morning and you say, I don't want to go into office. I don't want to see those faces again. I don't want to go back to the job. Start looking for another job. I mean, he said that. So he says, you're spending 8 to 10 hours of your life every day there. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, and if you're not, happy with what is coming off all the work that you're doing, other than your salary, right? If you're unhappy, look for another job. And I think that was a piece of advice that I keep saying, because you go home, if you're not happy, you go home, you're grumpy, you get it off on your children, on your spouse. It doesn't make sense. But that is more on a personal side. On a more formal side, on a more, I would say, I keep telling my colleagues, also something similar. And I keep saying that you must have, that killer instinct. By killer instinct I don't mean by killer instinct that, you have to, backstab your colleagues, right? But you have to have a belief and a passion to get to what you're going to do, even if it means that I have to go and file those 20 files today, and somebody said, just file those papers in it, that feeling of, having to do and accomplishing a task, which is very important to the company at large. It might be the smallest job that you think is there today, but for the company, it's what's making it tick. Never say no. I always tell my colleagues that. I said, I as a boss, like colleagues who are always willing to work with me and are never going to say, no, that's not my job. I'm not going to do this. Because the ones who don't say that are the ones who really go up, because you get picked up. Nobody wants to hear a no. If you keep saying no and there's an opportunity, your boss is going to say, why? I asked him twice earlier, didn't come. Let me ask this guy. Just be ready to do whatever somebody is asking you to do. I really believe in that, Mark.
Very sound advice. And clearly, from your first point, you've always woken up and been happy to go back to work at HDFC.
Yes, even today. Yeah.
Fantastic. Good. Thank you very much indeed, Renu. It's been great to talk to you. Thank you.
Same here, Mark. Thank you. Stay safe, stay well.